I know this might sound strange. Maybe if someone else told me this story, I wouldn't believe it either. But I lived in that apartment. I was there every single day, and there were things that happened. Quiet things, small things, but repeated so precisely that I still can't explain them. It all started pretty simply. My fiancé and I moved into a small second-floor apartment about half an hour outside the city. The place was old but quiet. The rent was surprisingly low for the area. Nothing seemed off until I started to notice that not everything in that apartment actually felt like it belonged to us. We moved in early June. The heat hadn't hit full force yet, but the days were already getting heavy. The apartment wasn't spacious. 2 bedrooms, a tiny living room, a narrow balcony just big enough for a pair of foldable chairs. It came semi-furnished. An old microwave, a loud fridge, a working AC unit, and some light fixtures that were clearly older than they looked. Nothing fancy. But when the property manager handed us the keys, I remember something about her felt rushed. Not in a busy schedule way, but in a just sign and leave kind of way. She didn't linger, just smiled, said, "Everything still works," and left. That first night, we turned on all the lights to see how the place looked at night. Uneven lighting. The living room was harsh and bright, the kitchen was dim yellow, and the bedroom had this warm glow, soft pinkish light from an overhead fixture. The ceiling in that room was slightly lower than the others, and in the center was a ceiling fan. My fiancé flicked the switch and the fan started spinning. I looked up and listened to it turn. It was smooth, strangely smooth. We didn't sleep right away that night. Too much to unpack. I remember turning the fan off around 1 a.m. after shutting off all the lights. We crawled into bed, and I didn't think anything of it. The next morning, I woke up cold. Not freezing, but that weird kind of cold where there's airflow directly on your face. I opened my eyes and saw the ceiling fan spinning on the highest speed. I sat up, looked at the switch, then over at my fiancée. She was still asleep. I could have sworn I'd turned it off the night before. Maybe I bumped it? I didn't make a big deal out of it. But the same thing happened the next morning, and the one after that. And by the end of the week, I was waking up every day to that same cold air, that same silently aggressive spinning above us. I started paying closer attention. Every night before bed, I checked the switch myself. Lights off, fan off, double-checked. One night, I even looked at the clock, 12:46 a.m., just to be sure. Still, the next morning, I woke up with the cold air hitting my forehead and neck, and the fan spinning like it was trying to lift off. I asked my fiancée if she turned it on. She looked confused and said no. She even mentioned thinking about asking me to set it lower the night before, but saw me turn it off. That's when I knew something was wrong. I considered it might be an electrical issue. Maybe the switch was faulty. Maybe someone else in the building had some sort of access to our wiring. I searched online for similar cases, smart fans, faulty wall circuits, motion sensors, but none of that applied to our setup. Our fan was basic. Manual wall switch, no remote, no Wi-Fi, no timer. I checked the fuse box. Everything looked fine. Then I remembered that ceiling fans sometimes have separate wiring from the lights. Also, every time the fan turned on in the morning, the ceiling light came on too, even though both had been turned off the night before. One night, I decided to record it. I turned off the lights and fan around 1 a.m. and set my phone on a shelf facing the ceiling and wall switch in time-lapse mode. In the morning, as expected, the fan and light were on again. But when I reviewed the footage, I didn't see the moment it turned on. One frame showed the fan still. The next frame, it was already spinning. No visible motion. No one entered. The switch didn't move. I rewatched it in slow motion and noticed a tiny flash near the top edge of the screen. A soft red blink, barely noticeable. I stared at the ceiling. Smooth drywall. No visible cracks. No signs of a camera. But I knew something was active up there, something I had never installed. After that night, I started paying attention to every sound in the apartment, especially early in the morning. There was one sound I hadn't noticed before, but now it stood out clearly. It was a very faint click, like a switch being flipped or a small mechanism resetting. It didn't happen at midnight or deep in the night. It always came around 5 in the morning. Not loud, just once, but so consistent that I couldn't ignore it anymore. Some mornings, I stayed completely still in bed, eyes closed, just listening. Almost every time, around 5:14 a.m., in the quietest part of the morning, I heard that same sharp sound. It always came from the living room. At first, I thought it might be the fridge compressor or maybe the water heater, but it wasn't the right kind of sound, and those appliances weren't even near that part of the apartment. My fiancé never heard it. I started wondering if I was the only one picking up on these things. It felt like I was the only person in that space truly noticing what didn't belong. One Sunday morning, I decided to search the apartment. Not in a panic, just methodically. I checked every corner, behind the shoe rack, under the kitchen cabinets, inside air vents. I didn't know what exactly I was looking for, but I was sure I would know it when I saw it. I found it near the ceiling in the living room, just above the curtain rail. It was a tiny black circle recessed into one of the decorative wall lights. I had to stand on a chair to get close. When I looked directly at it, I realized it wasn't a screw or nail. It was a lens. A smooth, rounded piece of glass. I shined my phone's flashlight into it, and the reflection confirmed it. It was a camera. I didn't feel afraid at first. I felt angry. My initial instinct was to call the landlord, or maybe even the police. I also thought about telling my fiancée, but I hesitated. I didn't want to scare her unless I was absolutely sure what this was. I stood there, staring at it. The light fixture didn't blink, didn't hum, and there was no glow. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was waiting. I turned off all the lights in the living room and pulled the curtains shut. Then I walked to the bedroom doorway and looked back toward it. In the dark, from that angle, I could see it clearly. A faint red dot was glowing inside the wall light. It was infrared, active, watching. At that moment, I knew for sure that someone was on the other end. I didn't tell my fiancée right away. She's the kind of person who, if she found out there was a hidden camera recording us, even just one, she'd want to leave immediately. And honestly, at that point, I still didn't want to move out. I needed to know who was doing this and why. One evening, while my fiancée was away overnight visiting a friend, I took the chance to fully disassemble the ceiling fan. I needed to see where this system was really connected. I shut off the main breaker, got out the stepladder and a headlamp, and started removing each screw from the motor casing. When I opened the main housing and removed the light cover and motor cap, I discovered a hidden compartment built into the top of the fan. Inside was a circuit board with an antenna, a backup battery, and a live wireless transmitter chip. I had never seen one like it. It wasn't some cheap spy toy you'd find online. This was specialized, compact, and likely expensive. I carefully disconnected the device, and as soon as I pulled the backup power line, I heard a soft click outside almost immediately. I froze. I stood completely still for over a minute. Nothing. No movement. But it felt like something had just registered what I'd done. I packed the transmitter into a towel, placed it in a watch box, and locked it. I didn't go back to sleep. I lay in bed, eyes on the ceiling. That fan had been moving every single morning since we moved in. But that next morning, for the first time, it didn't. And that's when I realized something even more disturbing. If this system was transmitting live, and if it stopped broadcasting the moment I cut power, then someone out there knew the exact moment I found it. I thought about calling the police, and I did. I told them I found a hidden device inside my ceiling fan, one I didn't install, and it was actively transmitting. They came by the next afternoon. An officer and a tech support agent walked through the apartment. I showed them the device I had removed and even showed them the time-lapse footage from my phone, how the fan activated on its own, and the faint red blink from above. They asked a few questions. Then they took down a report and collected the device as evidence. I asked, "Will someone be investigating this? Can you trace the signal source?" The officer shook his head and said, "Unless you can prove it was used to record sensitive material, or unless you file a formal complaint and can name a suspect, there isn't much we can do." I asked again if they could at least look into the signal transmission. He said, "We can forward it to digital forensics, but without probable cause we can't request a trace." That was the last time I heard from them. No one called back. No one came to follow up. So I started looking into it myself. Because no one else was going to. After the police left, I thought maybe I'd feel a little better. But the uneasiness didn't go away. It just shifted. I wasn't afraid of the devices anymore. I was afraid of the silence that followed. The fan no longer turned on by itself. There were no more clicks in the morning. No strange lights. But the feeling of being watched didn't go away. I went back through the emails from the property manager and reread the lease. The person who signed the lease with us wasn't the actual property owner, just a representative of a management company. But the name of the former owner was still listed in the official records. I ran searches using that name. Nothing useful came up. No social media, no LinkedIn, no real results on Google. Just a few fragments of old forum posts from 2014 under the same name, offering interior monitoring hardware on some defunct tech message board. Maybe it was someone else with the same name. But I still wanted to be sure. The next night, while I was sitting at the dining table, my phone pinged. A small notification popped up from an app I'd forgotten I even installed. It was called Home Sync. I opened it. The interface displayed a warning. A new device is attempting to access the interior system. Allow connection from name_hidden_1. I had never set up any home control system. The app must have come pre-installed with one of the fixtures left behind by the previous owner. I pulled up the log history. The data showed a list of triggered events, lights turning on, outlets being activated, and the fan. According to the log, the ceiling fan had been turned on remotely at the same time every morning for 17 straight days. I tried to access the admin panel, but I didn't have permissions. I couldn't reset the password or change any settings. One detail stood out. The most recent login came from a location less than 500 meters from our apartment. I deleted the app immediately. Then I went to the breaker box and pulled power from every smart connected switch in the bedroom. After that, the notifications stopped. Nothing else happened through the app, but I knew that didn't mean it was over. Because the next morning, I found a faint handprint on the glass door leading to our balcony. It was on the outside. A large adult hand pressed flat against the glass. The kind of mark left behind by someone who had been standing there for a long time. I couldn't stay passive anymore. I needed to know who this person was, not out of curiosity, but because after realizing that someone could control devices in our home from just a few hundred meters away, I no longer felt safe living there. I went back to the lease and screenshotted everything related to the previous owner. Full name, transaction ID, a scanned copy of a property transfer certificate that had been attached in an earlier email. Everything looked legal. Nothing seemed off on paper. I looked up one of the old email addresses that had been CC'd by the management company during our signing. After a bit of digging, I found an old property listing from 2018. Same owner name, posted on a small real estate forum. In the contact info section, there was a phone number and a listed address. Lot B42, Avondale Storage, zip 832XX. I drove out there the next day. It was a self-storage facility in an industrial zone about 40 minutes from where we lived. Metal gates, An empty front office, no visible security cameras, at least not from outside. I parked and walked around to the back. Each unit was numbered. B42 was near the end of the row. The roll-up door was closed. The padlock was slightly rusted. I didn't know if the person had ever lived there or just stored equipment, but when I crouched and leaned close to the bottom edge of the door, I caught a faint scent, rotting wood and warm metal. No one was there. No sign of recent activity. I started to walk away, then noticed something that stopped me. On the left edge of the roll-up door, there was a fresh scratch, like someone had used a metal hook or tool to try and pry it open recently. I went home. 3 days later, I decided to check again, but this time the entire B row had been repainted. Every unit had new locks. The numbers were gone. I went to the front office. A man I hadn't seen before was there, not wearing any sort of uniform. I asked casually about the B units. He looked me in the eye and said, "B row is under management review. No access allowed. Leave your contact information if you want a call back." I left my number. No one ever called me. And after that day, the HomeSync app stopped working. The app itself vanished from the store. When I checked the system log again, the access history had been wiped. I decided to remove the drywall around the ceiling in our bedroom to inspect the wiring. Not because I thought I'd find another device, but because I no longer trusted anything that came built into the apartment. I needed to see the wires with my own eyes. I needed to know what was really inside the walls. While scraping paint near the ceiling fan to expose the wiring, my utility blade snagged on something solid. I tapped the surface. It wasn't hollow. I gently pried at the plasterboard, expecting to hit a structural beam. Instead, a folded piece of paper dropped to the floor. It was yellowed, torn at the corners, folded in half. I crouched and picked it up. There was only one line written in faded black ink. "He doesn't just watch, he's coming back." No signature, no date, nothing else. I read it over and over. My mind started spinning. Who was he? Was it someone who used to live here? Someone who discovered what I just discovered? Or was it the person who left the message in the first place, trying to warn me, or maybe threaten me? I checked that section of the wall carefully. There was nothing else hidden there. But that same night, after taking a shower, I wiped the fog from the bathroom mirror and froze. A faint line of handwriting was visible in the condensation. Letters drawn by finger, just clear enough to read, "Don't leave her home alone." I nearly dropped the towel. I called out to my fiancée. She came in, but by the time she entered, the mirror had fully fogged again. The message was gone. I didn't tell her what it said. I just said the mirror was smudged, probably from someone wiping it with a damp cloth before. But in my head, I knew. This wasn't just about a camera, or a fan, or a signal. This was about someone who had been here, or someone who never left. We moved out of that apartment 1 week after I found the note. Not because something dramatic happened. There was no break-in, no direct threat, no final event. Just a quiet, growing sense that whatever this was, it wasn't finished. I told my fiancée the AC wiring was faulty and I didn't trust the electrical system. She agreed to move right away. I think in her own way she sensed something too, even if she didn't say it. I never told her about the note in the wall. I never told her what appeared on the mirror. Maybe I was wrong to keep it from her, but I didn't want her to carry the same fear I had been living with. On the day we packed up, while taking down the curtains near the balcony, I noticed a small tag behind the wooden trim. It wasn't a brand label or serial number. It had 3 words printed on it. Unit tested, pass. I don't know what that meant. A quality check, a note from the installer, or something else entirely. A confirmation that this unit, this apartment, was ready for something I still didn't understand. Either way, we left. I cut ties with the management company, canceled every auto payment, and didn't go back to retrieve anything we left behind. To this day, I refuse to rent any unit that comes pre-furnished. If there's a ceiling fan, I take it down the first week, and every time I wake up at night without thinking, I always glance up at the ceiling, even when there's nothing there. But once in a while, just every now and then, I still dream about the fan turning. Not the sound of air, just that soft mechanical click right before sunrise.